Hey guys, Fire here with my top 5 mid laners for patch 3.15. Now this list is based on their ability to carry solo queue and how good they are overall, but let me just point out that there are a lot of other viable choices. These are just the best right now. So first up at number 5 we have Nidalee. So she can struggle in lane, but her real strength is mid to late game. She has insane poke, a ridiculous heal, she is really safe and can carry the game completely on her own. Now the real reason why she is sitting on this list is because she has a really high skill cap, meaning that the better you get at her, the more impact you will have in the game. Now weaker Nidalee players will struggle when their team doesn't let her poke, but all you need is 1 or 2 magical spears and you can turn the lost game around. Nidalee's biggest weakness right now is that her early damage is not as high as it used to be, which means that you need to try and create advantages early or just stall the game out a bit. Now this isn't that hard to do though, because Nidalee can push away pretty easily and roam, and because Nidalee can get to other lanes so fast, she'll often catch them off guard. Now when you consider all of this, that she can still have a huge impact when behind, that she has an 80% pick ban rate in the OGN, and she is honestly the most annoying mid laner to play against, she deserves her spot here. There's a standard build on screen now, and I've also put a bunch of other viable items for Nidalee there, so you can kind of swap things out and find the best mix. The one thing I will say is that if you're behind, you really can't afford to build CDR or defense, so you'll need a death cap and void staff as soon as possible. Now as I said before, Nidalee's lane phase is naturally pretty weak, but you do have the opportunity to outplay your opponent and get ahead. Now this outplay potential is going to heavily rely on whether you can hit spears in the lane phase, as if really just 2 spears will put them on the back foot. Now a little trick is to hide just behind the walls in mid lane between the waves and try and get a cheeky spear when they come to CS. You won't really miss anything doing this, and it just gives you the chance to get ahead for free. Now once you hit level 6, you're really best as a roamer rather than trying to dominate your laner, so just push the wave and pick a lane to roam to. Now when roaming, always make sure that you retreat back out of vision first before you move, and then try and get behind the enemy laners. Now playing against Nidalee is a lot like playing against Ezreal. You just don't get hit by the skill shot and you pretty much win. There are 2 things that are really strong against Nidalee though, and these are the easiest ways to shut her down. So first off, you should always push the wave and keep Nidalee on her tower. Not only is she poo at last hitting under turret, but she also has no wave clear to keep it getting off the turret until level 6. Even at level 6, she'll have to come into melee range to clear, at which point you can just harass, and pushing her also stops her roaming. Now the other thing is that you should always try and harass her as much as possible and force her to use her mana on healing herself rather than spearing you. Doing this means she has no potential to kill you or even follow up on ganks, so for these reasons people like Syndra and Gragas are really good against her. So at number 4 we have Oriana, and you're probably going to be a little bit surprised as to why she isn't higher on this list. Now the main reason is because while she is still really strong, she's more of a utility mage rather than a full out damage source, meaning that others can carry a little bit harder, especially mid game. Now you have a lot of damage as soon as you get items. She is a great AoE CC ultimate, really good utility in her speed buff and shield, and she also has pretty good lane pressure. Oriana's biggest weaknesses really are her lack of damage early, her reliance on her ultimate, and her lack of mobility. Now if you get caught as Oriana and have no flash, you're pretty much screwed. Your shield is not going to be enough unless you max it, which is why you'll often see assassins or very tanky bruisers picked against her. Now she is more reliable in some ways than other mids on this list, as she can stay at the back of a fight and doesn't really have any skill shots apart from her ult. This means that her damage is pretty guaranteed, though if you do miss that ult you will probably lose the fight. I'd argue that Athene's is required on Oriana, as it solves her mana issues and provides CDR, which means that you can reposition your ball more often. I've put a bunch of other viable items on screen, but in general you just want to get a ton of damage so your ultimate is high impact. Now you actually have more kill potential as Oriana than people really give her credit for, though your main focus should be farming, as you're so reliant on items for damage. Now try to harass the enemy laner down, and when they are around 50% you can ult and go for a kill. Even if you don't get the kill, you will force them out of lane, and you'll also show that those balls aren't just for show. Now a little trick for laning as well is that when your jungler comes to gank, you can often use them as the ball delivery system for your ultimate, completely wrecking the enemy laner. Oriana's wave clear is really good, and she has a speed buff, meaning her roam isn't that bad either, so you can just shove the enemy to turret and then quickly move to another lane. Now when you're playing against Oriana, the most important thing to keep in mind is that she's about persistent damage, not burst. Now this means that if you engage on her at 100% health, there is no way she will have enough damage to kill you, and by picking the fight she will always lose. You can shut her down pretty easily. Now it's also really important to play the cooldown game with her, so when she uses her QW combo on minions, it means she can't use it on you, and so that's your chance to trade. This kind of leads on to why heavy pushers are good against Ori as well, as it will force her to use her abilities on the wave rather than killing you. Now the final thing to bear in mind is that she is a sitting duck without her flash, so if you manage to blow it by going aggressively, which honestly isn't that hard to do, just get your junglers to camp and ruin her day. At number 3 we have probably the highest skill cap champion in the game in Syndra. Now Syndra has one of the highest bursts at level 6, she punishes mistakes incredibly hard, she can kill pretty much anyone instantly and win any lane matchup. Now she is pretty underplayed in solo queue right now, but the reason she is so good is because she snowballs so hard and can have a huge impact in a game. Most mid laners' damage either comes in burst or persistent damage, for example Ryze is persistent whereas Annie is burst, but Syndra has both. Her Q is really low cooldown with Athene's and her ultimate combo will wreck someone. This really means that not only will she blow her load and remove someone from the fight, but she stays a big threat afterwards too. The reason I put her so high up the list is because her skill cap is so high that it means that you can literally win any matchup if you're good enough with her, and that is actually pretty scary. Now there are a few builds that you can go for Syndra. I personally prefer the first one because it gives you some CDR, meaning that you're more of a threat throughout the fight, whereas the second build focuses on just wrecking one person and winning the fight that way. When you're laning as Syndra, you should be asking yourself one question all the time, and that is, if I slap them with my balls right now, can I kill them? Syndra has so much kill potential, it's unreal, and the best way to do it is to harass with your Q a few times, then line up a stun with your E, follow it up with your Q and W combo, and finally your ultimate. Remember that your ult does more damage based on how many balls are on the map, and so you'll want to use it last in your rotation. Now unless you're going for a kill, don't use your E to just harass, as that's pretty much the only thing that will save you from a gank, and you can even interrupt dashes like Jarvan's jump with your E if you time it right. And when you're playing against Syndra, you want to take advantage of her biggest weakness, which is her lack of mobility. Now this is why someone like Fizz is so good against her. Not only can he mitigate her ult with his pole stick thingy, but he can also fish her and she has no way of escaping him. Now as soon as you dodge her stun too, it's pretty hard for her to kill you, so this is a great time to go aggressive. CC is also really good against her, so champs like Ahri and Kassadin do well because A, they can dodge her Q with their ult, and B, they have CC to lock her down while they burst her. So at number 2 we have the midget bomber that is Zigz. Now Zigz has kind of risen to power this patch, mainly because of the nerf to assassins that made his life extremely difficult. Now Zigz has great lane control and bully potential, great teamfight damage and amazing burst with only a few items. The biggest problem with Zigz is that all of his made damage is skill shots, meaning that if you miss them you're completely useless. A few patches ago though, they did tweak his Q and made it kind of feel a lot easier to hit, which goes some way to fixing this problem. His passive and Q are the main reasons why he is such a lane bully. You'll be exchanging a lot of auto attacks in the early part of the lane phase, and the extra passive damage will really give you an edge. Then we get to probably his strongest phase, which is team fighting. He has an AoE nuke, AoE persistent damage, and even zone control with his minefield and satchel charge. Now there are two real ways to build Zigz and both are good. I'd argue Athene's is almost always needed though, for the same reasons as Ori, that you really need the mana regen, and the CDR means you can throw more bombs. As I said before, his passive is where a lot of his lane pressure comes from, and is also part of his basic trade combo, which is an auto attack into a Q. Now this combination does a lot of damage and you can just run away afterwards, meaning it's so hard to return that damage. Now apart from using your passive, just throw your Q out and try and get it to bounce onto the enemy. This again puts you in no danger, and if you do hit it then it's free damage. Save your W for when you get ganked, as this is your only escape, and the best way of doing it is to just place it directly underneath you and instantly pop it. Now Zigz is really hard to gank with his minefield and his satchel charge, which is why laners that have hard CC are so effective. It holds Zigz in place long enough for your jungler to get to him, and it will also stop him jumping away immediately. Funnily enough, the two biggest things to avoid are the two things I mentioned as to how Zigz will win his lane. Now you're going to have to dodge his Q, which actually isn't too difficult, and not trade basic attacks when his passive is up. Now most Zigz players will move forward to try and basic attack you when they have their passive available, which makes them very predictable. If you're playing as someone like Ahri for example, you can just move backwards and then charm him when he comes in front of his minions. This will do a ton of damage when you combine it with your other abilities, and he'll have no choice but to fall back. The other thing to bear in mind is that his passive goes away when he has to CS, so if you don't have a way to punish him, just walk back, wait for him to attack a minion, and it's kind of rare that he's ever going to miss CS just to try and trade. So at number 1, and you're all going to have guessed it, it's the terror that is Kassadin. Now most of you will probably have forgot what this champion even looks like because he's always banned, but there's a reason why he's banned. Now to put it simply, every mid laner has a weak element to their game, like how Zigz snowballs hard but is a poor roamer, and Kassadin just doesn't fit into this. He's a strong roamer, he's a really safe laner, he snowballs really hard, he wins in most matchups, and he outscales most mid laners. Now I'm just going to go back and back some of that up because it's a pretty bold statement. So Kassadin is weak early, but when he gets his ultimate, it's practically impossible to outtrade him. He's just going to ultimate onto you, Q and E for huge damage, and then walk away because you're silenced and slowed, meaning you can't even trade back. His ultimate also means that he can get to lanes and bypass wards easily. He can also escape ganks with it, and he doesn't need many items to do a ton of damage. This kind of face roll playstyle and difficulty of shutting him down is why he deserves the #1 spot right now. So most Cass players, including myself, will go for the first build. It gives you a lot of damage, but it also gives you enough survivability to dive in teamfights. Now the second build is for expert Cass players. You'll do a freaking ton of damage, but you're so vulnerable to being killed. So pre-6 you will suck in lane and it'll be frustrating, but just wait it out. In most cases you'll be pushed your turret, but you're actually pretty good at CSing here, and there are a few little tricks as well. Firstly, you can use your W, which will give you enough damage to finish off any creep after the tower shots. Now secondly, and a little bit more uncommon, is don't max your Q if you're permanently under your turret. You'll need to CS with your Q and the mana cost goes up with rank, so just max your E instead. This actually means your all-in damage is about the same, but your poke is going to be worse, so it doesn't hurt you that much, but it will let you CS a lot more with your Q before running out of mana. Now once you hit level 6, you'll want to start taking it to the enemy laner by jumping in and using your Q and E combo. Now if they don't have any damage to return, you can activate your W and start to beat their face, otherwise just walk away. Now make sure you never do this when you can't see their jungler though, because you're a really easy target to gank with no ultimate. Now playing against Cass is actually really tough, but try to punish him as hard as possible before he hits level 6. Now how you do this really depends on their jungler, so if it's someone like Warwick who can't really gank, then just shove Cass and harass him under turret, but if it's someone like Lee Sin, just freeze the lane and zone Cass out of the CS. Now after level 6, don't underestimate him and make sure you ward both sides of your lane so he doesn't roam and he doesn't start to snowball. This is the biggest thing you can do. If Cass starts to snowball, you are screwed, so it's your job to make sure he doesn't. Now finally, in a team fighting phase, hard CC will lock him down long enough to kill, so it's a good idea to hold on to your CC abilities until he jumps into the fight. Okay, so there are two other mid laners who are really strong but didn't quite make the list. Now first off is Gragas, and it was actually a really tough choice between him and Nidalee for the 5th spot. The reason I chose Nidalee over Gragas was because if Gragas gets behind then he's completely useless, whereas Nidalee still does damage and has her heals, but also I think that Nidalee has more potential to solo carry a game. Now Gragas is still a great pick and he's better in some situations, so if you're good with him just keep playing him. Now Fizz is the last champion I wanted to mention, and the reason he isn't on this list is because I think it's too easy to shut him down if your team is behind. Now all of these other laners on the list can carry from behind, whereas if Fizz jumps into a fed team he's instantly going to blow up. His snowball potential is really good, and if you snowball other lanes after winning your own then he's a great pick, but I just don't think he's reliable enough to put on this list. So that wraps up my top 5 mid laners, and please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Now I do also love hearing your opinions, so if you think someone deserves to be here, let me know below and I'll try and reply to you. Please follow my stream, Twitter, Facebook, and I'll catch you in my next video.